The following is the second installment received from our anonymous source at Super Save Market. As with the previous account, I've made minimal edits. Several details have been independently verified, including the existence of a Super Save Market on Route 16 outside Millfield. However, daytime visits revealed only a normal grocery store. All attempts to photograph the location after 8 p.m. have resulted in corrupted image files. Make of that what you will. I didn't tell anyone about the Countess's coin. Not Trina, not Marcus, nobody. I should have. Store protocol clearly stated all gifts from priority customers needed to be logged and secured. But something about the way that silver disc warmed in my palm made me keep it secret. I tucked it into an old prescription bottle and buried it at the back of my sock drawer like a guilty teenager hiding contraband. My second night at Super Save started with intestinal regret. I'd spent my pre-shift hours celebrating my first paycheck with a greasy calzone from Vito's downtown. Big mistake. By the time I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot at 7:40 p.m., my stomach was performing gymnastics routines that would qualify for the Olympics. The store's fluorescent Super Save sign buzzed erratically in the twilight, several letters flickering like they were sending Morse code warnings. Danger, leave, run. But student loans don't pay themselves, and that $22 an hour with supernatural hazard compensation was too good to walk away from. Besides, I'd already survived one shift. How much weirder could it get? The universe loves rhetorical questions like that. Inside, the day shift was performing the now familiar closing rituals, ushering out lingering customers, tallying registers, pretending the store was a completely normal business that closed at 8 p.m., like the sign said. Sheila intercepted me near the time clock, that artificial auburn hair practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Good, you're back," she said, not sounding particularly convinced it was good at all. Marcus called out. The night manager called out. "Can he do that?" "Even the modified need sick days," she replied curtly. "Trina will be acting manager tonight. She's been here longest after Marcus." "Is that safe?" I asked, immediately feeling stupid for the question. Sheila's professional smile tightened. "We have contingencies. Just follow protocol and don't enter aisle 7, especially tonight." "What's different about tonight?" "It's Thursday," she said, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did in Super Save terms. "Oh, and the freezer delivery is coming at midnight. Someone needs to sign for it." I thought we couldn't enter the freezer alone. "You can't." She checked her watch. "I have to finish the day closing. Jerome will handle the delivery. Just stay at your register." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "And if anything without a face asks for credit approval, deny it. No matter what. Understand?" Before I could ask any of the 17 urgent questions that raised, she hurried off toward the office. At the employee entrance, I found Trina already changed into her uniform, the blue of her hair somehow more vivid under the break room lights. Her name badge today read Trina Liminal Inedible, Acting Manager. "Welcome back," she grinned, looking genuinely surprised. "Most don't return after meeting the Countess their first night." I shrugged. "Student loans are scarier than vampires." "She's not," Trina started, then caught herself. "Well, not exactly. Closer to a psychic parasite with aristocratic tendencies. But don't tell her I said that." She tossed me my name badge. identical to last night's. Alex, human, edible. No promotion to inedible yet? I asked. That takes seniority or non-human DNA, she replied. Though you might want to request an upgrade tonight. The Thursday crowd gets hungry. What's special about Thursdays? Trina glanced around, then lowered her voice. 3-day decomp. I don't know what that means, and I'm pretty sure I don't want to. Entities that feed on decay peak on Thursdays. Things that died Monday are reaching maximum ripeness in their culinary tradition. My calzone performed another somersault. That's their cultural practice, Trina interrupted firmly. We don't judge. Just be glad you're on register duty, not deli service. She checked her watch, an antique pocket watch attached to a chain around her neck, rather than a standard wristwatch. Positions in 10. Jerome and Yasmin are already prepping their departments. Kai's off tonight. Something about molecular destabilization. You're with me on front end. At precisely 8 p.m., the now familiar transition sequence began. Fluorescence dimming to that eerie blue tint. Air pressure shifting with an ear-popping sensation. Heavy thunk of automatic locks engaging. But tonight, something else happened. A low vibration ran through the floor, subtle at first, then intensifying until the shopping carts rattled in their corrals. Is that normal? I asked, gripping the register counter. Thursday normal, Trina replied, tapping commands into her register with practiced ease. The understock gets restless. The what? She just pointed downward with a grim smile. The vibration subsided after about 30 seconds. The overhead speakers crackled, and instead of the usual musak, a low drone began, something like Gregorian chanting, but in a language that sounded physically painful to pronounce. Ambiance for the Thursday crowd, Trina explained. Helps them feel welcome. I nodded as if this made perfect sense, while mentally recalculating exactly how much my student loans were worth to me. Our first customer materialized directly in front of my register without using the door. A spindly humanoid thing with skin like aged newspaper and fingers that branched into too many digits. Its face was a blank page with words constantly forming and dissolving across the surface. Welcome to Super Save, I managed, proud that my voice only trembled slightly. The words on its face swirled into the phrase, receipt please, before dissolving again. Do you have a rewards card? I asked, following standard procedure. It reached into what might have been a pocket and produced what looked like a library card from the 1950s, worn and stained with something that smelled strongly of vinegar. I scanned it as Trina had shown me, and the register displayed valued customer, the archivist, discount level, elder, dietary information. The archivist placed its items on the conveyor. 3 bottles of ink, a ream of yellowed paper, 7 disposable cameras, and a National Enquirer from 1986. As I scanned each item, the text on his face rearranged into different headlines from the tabloid. Would you like paper or plastic? I asked. Neither. Consume now. The text rippled across his face. To my horror, it picked up the National Enquirer and pressed it against where a mouth should be. The paper dissolved into the blank surface, headlines briefly appearing on its skin before sinking beneath the surface. That'll be $27.43, I said, trying to act like I hadn't just watched someone eat a magazine. It passed me a handful of what appeared to be library due date slips. The register accepted them as valid currency. "Have a nice evening," I offered, as it turned to leave. Its face briefly formed the words "time is flavor" before it simply ceased to exist, leaving behind the faint smell of old books. "Not bad," Trina commented from the next register. "The archivist usually unnerves first weekers." "Is it always going to be this weird?" I asked. "Oh, honey," she laughed. "That was practically normal. Just wait until the mold fathers arrive." The next 2 hours brought a parade of increasingly disturbing entities. Gelatinous masses that communicated through bubble patterns, humanoids with anatomically impossible joint configurations, a cluster of what appeared to be sentient dental tools shopping for mint floss. I processed each transaction per protocol, gradually settling into a rhythm despite the strangeness. Around 10:30 p.m., the automatic doors admitted a completely ordinary-looking middle-aged woman pushing a shopping cart with a squeaky wheel. She wore mom jeans and a sweatshirt with kittens on it. The only unusual thing was the cart's contents. It already contained what appeared to be a sleeping child. "Evening, Mrs. Bradshaw," Trina called from her register. "The usual tonight?" The woman nodded pleasantly. "Plus extra cereal, if you have the marshmallow kind. He's been extra hungry lately." I watched in mute horror as the child in the cart twitched, revealing a face that was mostly mouth. A circular orifice lined with concentric rows of teeth like a lamprey. Mrs. Bradshaw absently stroked its head as she wheeled past toward the cereal aisle. "What the?" I started. "Changeling support program," Trina explained quietly. "Some boundary dweller families get their kids switched. We help with the dietary transition. That's charitable. Corporate tax write-off," she shrugged. "Plus, keeps the fake courts happy. Don't stare too long at the replacement kid. It's rude in their culture." I turned back to my register just as the lights flickered dramatically. The background chanting grew louder for a moment, then cut out entirely. "Shit," Trina muttered, checking her pocket watch. "Right on schedule. What now?" "Mold fathers. Acting manager means I have to greet them. Watch both registers and don't offer rain checks on expired items." She hurried toward the entrance as the automatic doors slid open despite no one visibly approaching. A damp, earthy smell flooded the store, so thick I could almost see it rolling in like fog. The fluorescence dimmed further, taking on a greenish tinge that made the whole store look diseased. Through the haze came 3 tall figures in what appeared to be rotting Victorian formal wear. Their bodies seemed composed entirely of different types of fungus. Shelf mushrooms forming shoulders, slender white stalks for fingers, caps of various colors creating the suggestion of faces. They moved with unsettling grace, leaving trails of spores that spiraled in the air behind them. Trina greeted them with a deep bow. "Esteemed decomposers, Super Save welcomes your patronage. The ripened selections have been prepared in accordance with tradition." The tallest of the 3 bent towards her. Though it had no visible mouth, a voice emerged, wet and bubbling like someone speaking through mud.
"The manager is absent. Unfortunate."
"Acting Manager Trina will ensure all protocols are observed," she replied, maintaining impressive composure. The fungal entity made a sound like wet leaves shifting.
"The freezer delivery. We have concerns."
"All arrangements remain as agreed," Trina assured them. The 3 huddled together, fungal bodies partly merging in what appeared to be some form of communication. Finally, they separated and moved toward the produce section, leaving damp footprints that sprouted tiny mushrooms within seconds. Trina returned to the registers, her professional smile firmly in place but her eyes wide with tension. "What was that about?" I asked. "Politics," she said tersely. "The Mold Fathers have a standing arrangement with Marcus about certain merchandise. They're nervous about the change in management." "What kind of merchandise requires fungus aristocrats?" "The kind that costs more than your yearly salary and keeps the boundary stable." She glanced toward the produce section, where the Mold Fathers were now examining rotting fruit with elaborate ceremony. "Just keep ringing up customers. If any of their spores land on you, don't inhale." The next hour passed in a blur of bizarre transactions. The Thursday crowd was indeed focused on decay. Entities purchasing rotting produce, expired dairy products, even items labeled fermented memories and distilled regrets from a section I couldn't remember seeing before. Most troubling were the customers who bought nothing but paid to spend time in the dumpster area behind the store. At 11:45, Jerome appeared beside my register, startling me so badly I dropped a can of preserved absinthe I'd been scanning. "Freezer deliveries arrive in early," he said without preamble. His massive frame seemed tense, ritual scars standing out more prominently against his dark skin. "Need you to help?" "Me?" But Sheila said, "Protocols require 2 staff for freezer duty. Trina needs to stay with the Mold Fathers. Yasmin's handling an outbreak in produce, and I'm not doing it alone." He tossed me what looked like a hand-cranked flashlight. "If the lights fail, use this. Don't use your phone light no matter what." "Is the electricity unreliable?" Jerome gave me a pitying look. "The issue isn't the electricity. It's what the wrong kind of light attracts in there." Abandoning my register under Trina's watchful gaze, I followed Jerome through the store's back areas. The employee corridor stretched much longer than seemed physically possible, walls occasionally rippling as if breathing. We passed doors labeled with symbols rather than words, and storage areas containing items that defied categorization. The walk-in freezer entrance was marked with warnings in multiple languages, some of which appeared to be written vertically or in 3 dimensions. Jerome withdrew an old-fashioned key from around his neck. "Rules for the freezer," he instructed, voice deadly serious. "Stay within sight of me at all times. Touch nothing except what I directly hand you. If you hear voices calling your name, ignore them. If something touches your shoulder, do not turn around. If the door closes, crank the flashlight continuously until I get it open again." "What's actually in there?" I asked, stomach now clenching for reasons unrelated to bad calzone. "Inventory," he replied cryptically, turning the key in the lock. "And the things that guard it." The freezer door swung open with a pressurized hiss, releasing a cloud of vapor so cold it burned my lungs. Beyond the threshold was darkness. Not the darkness of an unlit room, but something deeper and more absolute. The weak light from the hallway seemed to stop at the doorway as if afraid to enter. Jerome flipped a switch, and overhead fluorescence flickered reluctantly to life, revealing a space much larger than the exterior of the building would allow. Metal shelving stretched into impossible distance, creating aisles that vanished into darkness beyond the reach of the light. The air sparkled with frost crystals that seemed to move with purpose rather than float randomly. "Delivery dogs this way," Jerome said, moving with surprising speed for his size. "Don't look too long at the ceiling. Naturally, I immediately looked up. The ceiling wasn't a ceiling at all, but what appeared to be a frozen ocean, complete with suspended marine life. Dark shapes moved through the ice above us, some unnervingly large. I said, "Don't look," Jerome growled, yanking my arm. They notice attention. We navigated through the labyrinthine shelves, stocked with products both mundane and mystifying. Standard frozen pizzas alongside packages labeled suspended animation and temporal fragments. Some items pulsed with faint light, others seemed to absorb light around them. Several shelves contained nothing but identical brown paper packages humming faintly. The delivery dock was essentially a metal door set into the back wall of the freezer, coated in a thick layer of iridescent frost. A red light pulsed beside it, accompanied by a low drone that made my fillings vibrate. "They're ready," Jerome muttered, pulling on heavy gloves from a nearby locker. He tossed me a pair. "Put these on. Don't touch the packages with bare skin, unless you want frostbite that thinks for itself." As I struggled with the oversized gloves, the metal door began to slide upward with a sound like tearing fabric. Beyond wasn't the expected loading area, but a swirling vortex of blue-black energy, crackling with crystalline structures that formed and shattered continuously. A figure emerged from the vortex, vaguely humanoid, but composed entirely of angles that hurt to look at directly. It pushed a floating pallet stacked with large cubic containers encased in otherworldly ice.
Standard delivery for Super Save 481.
It said in a voice like breaking glass.
Manager signature required.
Jerome hesitated. Acting manager is engaged with priority customers. The delivery entity tilted what might have been its head.
Protocols require management authorization for boundary materials.
"I'll get Trina," I offered. "No time," Jerome said sharply, as the vortex behind the delivery entity began to contract. "The portal's unstable tonight." He turned to the entity.
Override Protocol 739. Emergency authorization. Jerome Harris, Senior Staff.
The entity produced a clipboard made of what appeared to be frozen smoke.
Blood signature required for override.
Without hesitation, Jerome removed his glove and pressed his thumb against the clipboard. Where they connected, frost crystallized into a complex pattern. The entity seemed satisfied, pushing the floating pallet forward.
3 unit stabilization material, 1 unit containment media, 1 unit emergency supplies,
It stated.
Maintenance inspection due in 6 lunar cycles. Boundary stability currently at 73%. Warning logged.
73? Jerome's expression darkened. It was 81, last delivery.
Accelerated deterioration detected. Cause undetermined.
The entity began retreating toward the vortex.
Information forwarded to Corporate Boundary Division. Recommend increased vigilance.
Before Jerome could ask more, the entity vanished into the swirling energy, which collapsed in on itself with a sound like distant thunder. The metal door slammed down, leaving us alone with the floating pallet. "This isn't good," Jerome muttered, examining the containers. 8% drop in 1 month. "What exactly is boundary stability?" I asked, helping him guide the floating pallet toward a specialized storage area marked with warning symbols. Jerome gave me a measuring look, seeming to debate how much to reveal. "The town sits on a boundary between realities. The store helps maintain it. These materials," he gestured to the containers, "keep things from bleeding through too much. Things like our customers. The customers are the control flow," he explained. securing the containers in what appeared to be refrigerated vaults. What's on the other side of deterioration is much worse. Worse than fungus aristocrats and lamprey children. A haunted look crossed his face. You have no idea. He slammed the vault shut with more force than necessary. We need to tell Trina about the stability drop. As we turned to leave, the lights flickered dramatically. In the momentary darkness, I felt something brush against my shoulder, light as cobweb but unmistakable. "Jerome," I whispered, when the lights returned. "Don't turn around," he said quietly. "Keep walking toward the exit. Normal pace." My skin crawled with the certainty that something was behind me, close enough that I could feel a chill radiating against my back. Each step toward the exit seemed to take an eternity, the presence behind me maintaining perfect distance. When we finally reached the freezer door, Jerome practically shoved me through before following and slamming it shut. He turned the key with shaking hands. "What was that?" I demanded once we were safely in the corridor. "Freezer Guardian," he said grimly. "It doesn't usually approach staff. Usually, it's getting bolder. Another sign the boundary's thinning." He pocketed the key. "Come on, we need to report to Trina." We found her still entertaining the Mold Fathers in a makeshift lounge area that had appeared near the deli counter. The fungal entities were consuming what looked like blue cheese through an osmosis process that was deeply unsettling to witness. Jerome pulled Trina aside while I stood awkwardly near the moldy aristocrats, trying to look anywhere but at their feeding process. One of them extended what might have been an arm in my direction, releasing a puff of golden spores that hung in the air between us.
"New blood.
It gurgled in that wet, bubbling voice.
You bear witness to the thinning."
"I'm just a cashier," I replied uneasily. The entity's cap pulsed with bioluminescent light.
"The Countess marked you. We sense her silver."
My hand instinctively went to my pocket, where the coin was definitely not kept. "I don't know what you mean."
"Bargains with the silver one end poorly."
Another of the entities commented, tendrils undulating.
"Time is her currency, and your account is overdrawn."
Before I could respond, Trina returned with Jerome in tow, her expression tight with controlled panic. "Esteemed decomposers," she addressed the Mold Fathers formally, "we value your insights regarding the boundary situation. Corporate has been notified of the deterioration." The tallest entity rose, stretching to an impossible height until its cap nearly brushed the ceiling.
"The arrangement stands thus. We consume what decays, preventing build-up at the edges. In exchange, safe passage and commerce. If the boundary fails..."
"It won't," Trina assured them, with more confidence than her eyes suggested. "We're implementing additional stabilization measures." The fungal entities perform their merging communication again before seemingly reaching a decision.
"We shall increase our consumption efforts. The rot must not reach critical mass."
They glided toward the exit, leaving trails of mushrooms sprouting from the linoleum.
"Watch the new blood. Silver attracts tarnish in these times."
After they departed, Trina rounded on me. "What do they mean about silver?" "No idea," I lied, remembering the coin burning like guilt in my sock drawer at home. She looked skeptical, but was interrupted by an announcement over the store speakers. Not the usual automated message, but a distorted voice that sounded like it was coming through water. "Attention night staff. Boundary fluctuation detected in aisle 7. Containment protocols in effect. Repeat, stay out of aisle 7." That's not Marcus, Trina said, suddenly pale. That's not even the PA system. Jerome's massive frame tensed. The border's bleeding through the announcements now. Should we evacuate? I asked. No, Trina decided after a moment. Standard containment should hold until morning. Jerome, reinforce the aisle barriers. I'll contact corporate emergency line. What about me? I asked. Back to your register, she ordered. Act normal for the remaining customers. The last thing we need is panic. I returned to the front end to find several entities queued at my register, including Mrs. Bradshaw, whose cart now contained multiple boxes of Lucky Charms and what appeared to be raw hamburger meat. The lamprey child in her cart was considerably larger than before, its circular mouth opening and closing hungrily. Did you find everything you needed? I asked, with forced cheerfulness as I scanned her items. Oh yes, she replied in that same suburban mom voice. Though I think the boundary fluctuation upset little Timmy. He gets cranky when reality's thin. As if on cue, the creature let out a high-pitched keening that made my eardrums vibrate painfully. Several light bulbs shattered overhead. Sorry about that, Mrs. Bradshaw said, seemingly unperturbed as she swiped her credit card. He's teething on this dimension. The counselor says it's perfectly normal for transitional children. I bagged her groceries as quickly as possible, wincing as Timmy continued to emit sounds that seemed to exist partially outside normal acoustic range. See you next Thursday, she called cheerfully as she wheeled the shrieking entity away. The remainder of my shift passed in tense efficiency. Something was clearly wrong. The store's dimensions seemed less stable, distances between departments stretching and compressing at random. The background chanting had been replaced by what sounded like whale songs played backward. Twice, I witnessed Jerome hurrying past with what appeared to be containment equipment, heading toward the increasingly distorted aisle 7, which now appeared to bend at impossible angles. At 7:30 a.m., Trina initiated early closing procedures. The few remaining night customers were ushered out with unusual haste. The night-specific products vanished more abruptly than usual, in some cases simply blinking out of existence rather than being properly relocated. Boundary is stabilizing, Trina announced after checking some kind of meter near the manager's office. Dawn proximity helps. By 7:55 a.m., the store had mostly reverted to its daytime appearance, though evidence of the night's events lingered in subtle ways. Phantom mushrooms briefly visible under certain angles of light, frost patterns on the windows that spelled words in no human language, a lingering smell of decay and ozone. As the day crew entered at 8 a.m., I noticed Sheila's eyes widen at the state of the store. She and Trina exchanged urgent whispers, Sheila's professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine fear. I clocked out in exhausted silence, body aching from tension. In the employee parking lot, the morning sun seemed impossibly bright after the unnatural darkness of the night shift. You survived, Trina remarked, appearing beside my car with uncanny silence. Even with boundary deterioration and freezer duty. Impressive for a second nighter. What happens if the boundary keeps thinning? I asked. Her usually sardonic expression faltered. Nothing good, for either side. She studied me closely. The Mold Fathers rarely speak directly to new staff. What did they say to you? I considered telling her about the coin then, about the Countess's unknown bargain. Instead, I said, just typical cryptic warnings. You know, doom approaches kind of stuff. She didn't look convinced. The Thursday crowd has been around longer than this town. When they warn, smart people listen. She tapped my name badge, which I'd forgotten to return. See you tomorrow night. Fridays are different. Different how? A smile that was more grimace than humor. Let's just say some customers only shop when the moon is right. Wear comfortable shoes. You might need to run. As I drove home, the rising sun illuminated the Super Save sign in my rearview mirror. In daylight, it was just a shabby discount supermarket at the edge of town. No one passing by would suspect what happened inside after dark. The strange commerce at the edge of reality, the thinning boundary between worlds. In my grandmother's house, I found the silver coin exactly where I'd left it, but changed somehow. The date on its reverse side was now clearly visible, exactly 1 year from my first shift. And now, alongside the coordinates, a single word had appeared in flowing script. Decision. I should have thrown it away. I should have told Trina or Marcus. Instead, I collapsed into bed, dreaming of fungal aristocrats, freezer guardians, and a boundary wearing dangerously thin between everyday life and something much, much worse. As Thursday became Friday, I slept fitfully, one question repeating endlessly in my unconscious mind. What exactly had my grandmother known about Super Save markets when she left me this house so conveniently nearby? The third installment is supposedly forthcoming. Our source reports that the boundary situation at Super Save 481 continued to deteriorate in the following weeks. If interest continues, I will share the next chapter when it arrives. In the meantime, I've been unable to locate any public records for a Jerome Harris or Trina associated with the store. County employment records show no night shift staff at all.